The first-class cabin of Flight AC 1922 from Toronto to Los Angeles gleamed with subtle luxury. Soft ambient lighting illuminated cream leather seats and polished wood accents, creating an atmosphere of exclusivity that justified the premium price tag. As passengers settled in for the 5-hour journey, flight attendant Vanessa Mitchell moved efficiently through her pre-flight routine, her crisp navy uniform and perfect makeup projecting the professionalism that Pacific Airlines demanded from its premium cabin crew. At 32, Vanessa was one of the airline's most requested first-class attendants. Her picture-perfect service and ability to anticipate needs before they were expressed had earned her commendations and the coveted LAX international rotation. After 10 years with Pacific, she prided herself on her ability to recognize important passengers instantly, executives, politicians, celebrities, and provide them with the subtle special treatment that made them feel valued without compromising the airline's standards of equality. Which is why she was slightly irritated when a latecomer slipped into seat 2A just minutes before the cabin door was scheduled to close. The man moved quietly, placing a worn backpack under the seat in front of him rather than using the ample overhead storage. Dressed in a rumpled black t-shirt, faded jeans, and boots that had seen better days, he seemed oblivious to the sidelong glances from other passengers in their tailored suits and designer travel wear. Vanessa's practiced smile remained fixed as she approached him with the pre-flight champagne tray. "Welcome aboard, sir. Would you care for a complimentary beverage before takeoff?" The man looked up, and something about his gaze, gentle yet somehow intensely present, momentarily caught her off guard. His hair was shoulder-length and slightly messy, and several days' worth of stubble shadowed his jaw. But it was his eyes that were arresting, dark, thoughtful, carrying a quiet depth that seemed at odds with his disheveled appearance. "Just water, please," he said with a small smile. "Still, if you have it." His voice was soft, almost melodic in its cadence, but Vanessa had already categorized him. Probably a tech industry type who'd been upgraded on miles or a buddy pass, unaccustomed to the refined atmosphere of first class. She'd seen it before, passengers who didn't quite belong in the premium cabin, who didn't understand its unspoken codes. "Of course," she replied, her tone professionally pleasant as she poured Evian into a crystal glass. As she handed it to him, she noticed something unusual around his neck. A simple leather cord from which hung what appeared to be a worn bronze token or medal of some kind. It was decidedly out of place among the discreet luxury of first class, where jewelry tended toward understated diamonds or platinum designer pieces. The man thanked her with genuine warmth, then turned his attention to the window as the last passengers boarded in the main cabin. Vanessa moved on, attending to the investment banker in 1D, who wanted his martini exactly as specified in my customer profile, and the elegant older woman in 3C who inquired about the wine selection with the expertise of a sommelier. As the aircraft pushed back from the gate and the safety demonstration began, Vanessa found her gaze drawn repeatedly to the man in 2A. There was something familiar about him, something she couldn't quite place. He sat quietly, seemingly lost in thought, occasionally touching the unusual pendant around his neck in what appeared to be an unconscious gesture of comfort or habit. Once the aircraft reached cruising altitude and the seatbelt signs dimmed, Vanessa began the first-class meal service. Pacific Airlines prided itself on its premium dining experience, complete with linen tablecloths, real silverware, and multi-course options prepared by celebrity chefs. As she set up the linen-covered tray table for the man in 2A, she decided to satisfy her curiosity. "That's an interesting necklace," she commented, gesturing to the pendant that now rested visibly against his black t-shirt. "Very unique." The man's hand went to the bronze piece, his fingers curling around it with a gentleness that suggested it held significant personal value. "Thank you," he said simply. "It was a gift from someone important to me." Something in his tone suggested there was more to the story, but Vanessa had already moved into her practiced spiel about the dinner options. "This evening we're featuring Chef Montoya's braised short rib with truffle risotto, or a pan-seared sea bass with saffron-infused quinoa. Both are paired with our sommelier's selection of wines." The man considered briefly. "The sea bass sounds good, but no wine for me, thank you." Vanessa nodded and moved on to the next passenger, but she found herself increasingly curious about the odd contrast this passenger presented. His casual, almost rumpled appearance alongside his quiet confidence and the mysterious pendant that seemed to hold such significance. As she prepared the meal trays in the galley, her colleague Marcus leaned in. "Full cabin today. Anyone interesting?" Vanessa shrugged. "The usual mix, though there's a guy in 2A who seems a bit out of place, wearing jeans and a t-shirt with some strange necklace. Looks like something from a gift shop at a museum or a street vendor." Marcus raised an eyebrow, peering discreetly around the galley partition. His eyes widened slightly, and he pulled back quickly. "Vanessa," he whispered, "that's Keanu Reeves." Vanessa blinked, then looked again. The profile, the thoughtful eyes, the gentle demeanor. How had she missed it? Now that Marcus mentioned it, the resemblance was obvious, yet she'd been so focused on his casual attire and the unusual necklace that she'd completely overlooked his identity. "Are you sure?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "Positive," Marcus confirmed. "He was on my flight from New York last month. Nicest celebrity I've ever served. Completely low-key, thanked every crew member individually, left a handwritten note of appreciation for the team." Vanessa felt a flush of embarrassment at her earlier dismissive categorization. Keanu Reeves was known not only for his acting career, but for his philanthropy and famously humble lifestyle despite his success. She'd even read an article about how he often took public transportation and dressed simply, avoiding the flashy displays of wealth typical of Hollywood. "Well," she said, regaining her composure, "guess I should make sure his sea bass is perfect then." As the meal service progressed, Vanessa found herself paying special attention to Keanu's table, ensuring his water glass was never less than half full and checking more frequently than necessary if he needed anything. She was determined to make up for her initial judgment with impeccable service. When she cleared his nearly empty plate, she decided to make another attempt at conversation. "Was everything to your satisfaction, mister?" She left the question hanging, curious if he would offer his name. "It was delicious, thank you," he replied with that same gentle smile, neither confirming nor correcting her pretense of not recognizing him. "The chef has a way with seafood." "I noticed you're wearing that necklace again," Vanessa said, gesturing to the bronze pendant. "It must be very special to you." Something in her tone, perhaps a lingering hint of judgment or simply professional curiosity, caused the passenger in 1B, a middle-aged executive type who had been typing aggressively on his laptop throughout the meal, to glance up with interest. Keanu's fingers went to the pendant again, but this time his expression shifted subtly. There was a flicker of something, not offense, but perhaps a gentle guardedness in his eyes. "It is," he said simply, "very special." Under normal circumstances, Vanessa would have recognized the polite boundary and moved on. But something, perhaps her earlier embarrassment at not recognizing him or a desire to establish a more authentic connection with a famous passenger, pushed her to continue. "It just seems so ordinary for someone like—" She caught herself, realizing too late that her comment carried an implied criticism. "I mean, it's not what one would expect in first class." The words hung in the air, their unintended condescension immediately obvious, not just to Keanu, but to several nearby passengers who had begun to take notice of their interaction. The executive in 1B had even removed his noise-canceling headphones to listen more intently. Keanu looked at her for a long moment, his expression not angry, but thoughtful, as if he were carefully considering his response. When he spoke, his voice remained as gentle as before, but carried a quiet intensity that commanded attention. "What we value most rarely has anything to do with its monetary worth," he said. "This pendant is made of bronze recovered from a shipwreck off the coast of Mexico. My sister made it for me when I was going through a difficult time. Its value to me can't be measured in dollars or carats." The cabin seemed to grow quieter, several passengers now openly watching the exchange. Vanessa felt heat rising to her cheeks, the implicit rebuke in his words landing with perfect precision despite their kind delivery. I apologize," she stammered. "I didn't mean to imply." "No apology necessary," Keanu said, his smile returning. "We all make assumptions based on appearances. The trick is recognizing when we're doing it." Under normal circumstances, the exchange might have ended there, a momentary awkwardness smoothed over by mutual politeness. But the executive in 1B, who had clearly been eavesdropping, chose that moment to insert himself into the conversation. "Don't let her off so easily," he said loudly, leaning across the aisle toward Keanu. "That was completely unprofessional. She basically insulted your personal choices based on some arbitrary standard of what belongs in first class." He made air quotes around the word belongs, his tone dripping with righteous indignation on behalf of a celebrity he clearly recognized. Vanessa froze, mortified as several other passengers looked up at the commotion. In 10 years of flying, she had never been called out by a passenger in this manner, and certainly not in front of a cabin full of high-value customers. Keanu turned to the executive, his expression still calm but now carrying a hint of firmness. "Actually, I think the conversation was between us, and I'm comfortable with how it's going." The executive persisted. "But she should know better. He lowered his voice to a stage whisper. "You're Keanu Reeves. She has no right to question your choices." "On the contrary," Keanu replied, his voice still measured but with unmistakable conviction. "She has every right to her curiosity, just as I have every right to explain or not explain my personal choices. What matters isn't her question, but the assumption behind it, an assumption I think we've now addressed." The executive looked taken aback, clearly having expected the actor to ally with him against the flight attendant. Meanwhile, Vanessa stood frozen, service tray in hand, caught in a moment of professional crisis, unlike any she'd experienced before. "Mr. Reeves is right," she finally managed, finding her voice. "My comment was inappropriate, and I apologize again. It reflected an assumption that doesn't align with our airline's values of respect for all passengers." Keanu looked up at her, and something in his expression, a subtle nod of acknowledgement perhaps, gave her the courage to continue. "If you'll excuse me, I'll continue with the service now. And Mr. Reeves, if there's anything specific you need for the remainder of the flight, please don't hesitate to let me know." With as much dignity as she could muster, Vanessa moved on to the next row, aware of the whispers now circulating through the cabin as recognition of the famous passenger spread. Behind her, she could hear Keanu gently but firmly deflecting the executive's continued attempts at conversation, redirecting the man back to his own business with such skill that even the rebuff seemed like an act of kindness. In the galley, Vanessa's hands trembled slightly as she arranged dessert plates. Marcus approached, concern evident in his expression. "Everything okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Worse," Vanessa whispered. "I just put my foot so far in my mouth I may never recover. I basically insulted Keanu Reeves' necklace, implied it wasn't good enough for first class, and then a passenger called me out in front of everyone." Marcus winced. "Ouch, what did Keanu do?" "That's the thing," Vanessa said, shaking her head in disbelief. "He defended me, or at least, he didn't pile on. He was kinder than I deserved." She recounted the exchange, her professional composure gradually returning as she put the interaction into words. As she spoke, she realized that what had initially felt like catastrophic career misstep had actually become something else, a moment of genuine human connection and a powerful lesson in humility. "You know what? Go take him his dessert personally," Marcus suggested. "Thank him for being understanding. From what I've heard, he's pretty much the nicest guy in Hollywood." Vanessa nodded, selecting the most perfect of the chocolate mousse offerings and adding an extra chocolate truffle to the plate. Taking a deep breath, she returned to the cabin. Keanu was reading now, a paperback book rather than a tablet or phone, another subtle deviation from typical first-class passenger behavior. He looked up as she approached, his expression open and without a trace of the resentment she feared she might see. "I wanted to bring you your dessert personally," Vanessa said quietly, placing the elegant plate before him, "and to thank you for your graciousness earlier. I'm deeply sorry for my presumptuous comment about your necklace. It was unprofessional and unkind." Keanu closed his book, giving her his full attention. "Thank you, but please don't worry about it. We all have moments where our preconceptions get the better of us." Vanessa hesitated, then decided to be fully honest. "If I may ask, and please feel free to decline, what's the significance of the pendant? You mentioned your sister made it." A soft smile crossed his face as his fingers once again found the bronze piece. My sister Kim made it for me during a particularly dark time in my life. The bronze is from a shipwreck that was discovered the same year I lost someone very important to me. She said it was a reminder that even from the depths of the ocean, or the depths of grief, beautiful things can eventually emerge and find new purpose. The simple eloquence of his explanation rendered Vanessa momentarily speechless. The pendant, which she had dismissed as unsuitably ordinary for a wealthy passenger, suddenly revealed itself as something far more precious than any luxury brand could produce. "That's beautiful," she finally said. "Thank you for sharing that with me." Keanu nodded, his expression suggesting the sharing had been a choice freely made rather than an obligation. Value and worth are interesting concepts, aren't they? We're trained to assess them based on surface appearances, but the most valuable things I own have no relationship to their price tag. "I'm learning that lesson today," Vanessa admitted with a small, self-deprecating smile. "We're all learning, all the time," he replied. "Or at least we should be." As she moved to continue her service duties, Vanessa noticed the executive from 1B watching their exchange with a mixture of curiosity and surprise. She offered him a professional nod as she passed, noting with some satisfaction that he looked away first, perhaps reconsidering his own behavior. For the remainder of the flight, Vanessa continued her duties with renewed mindfulness, acutely aware that her earlier lapse had been the result of exactly the kind of superficial judgment she had always prided herself on avoiding. She found herself looking more deeply at each passenger, wondering what personal stories and meaningful treasures they might carry that had nothing to do with their external appearance or status. As the aircraft began its descent into Los Angeles, she made a final pass through the cabin to collect headphones and ensure tray tables were stowed. When she reached Keanu's seat, he handed her his headphones with a thank you, then hesitated as if considering something. "May I ask your name?" he inquired. "Vanessa," she replied, somewhat surprised by the question. "Vanessa," he repeated, as if committing it to memory. "Thank you for your service today, and for the conversation. Sometimes the most meaningful interactions come from moments of misunderstanding." "That's very generous of you," she said, genuinely touched by his perspective. "Not generosity," he corrected gently. "Just experience. We're all works in progress, trying to be better today than we were yesterday." As the plane taxied to the gate, Vanessa noticed Keanu removing a small notebook from his backpack. He wrote something briefly, then folded the page and tucked it into the seat pocket in front of him. When the seatbelt sign finally dimmed and passengers began collecting their belongings, he stood, nodded a quiet goodbye to her, and made his way toward the exit, his worn backpack slung over one shoulder. Unlike many first-class passengers who rushed to be first off the plane, he paused several times to let older passengers go ahead of him. At the door, he thanked each crew member individually, then disappeared into the jetway without fanfare. When Vanessa began the post-flight cabin check, she found the folded note in the seat pocket at 2A. Opening it curiously, she read, "Vanessa, our interactions shape us in ways we can't always see in the moment. Thank you for the reminder that what we value most comes from connection, not collection. Your honesty after our misunderstanding showed true character. With respect, Keanu P.S. The pendant's journey from ocean floor to meaningful symbol reminds me daily that transformation is always possible. Perhaps that's true for moments of misunderstanding, too." Vanessa read the note twice, then carefully folded it and placed it in her pocket. As she completed her cabin check, she found herself touching the paper occasionally, as if to confirm its reality, much the way Keanu had touched his pendant throughout the flight. 3 weeks later, Vanessa stood at the check-in podium for first class on another LAX-bound flight, greeting passengers with her usual professional courtesy. She had shared the story of her encounter with Keanu Reeves with only a few close colleagues, keeping his note private, not as a celebrity souvenir to boast about, but as a personal reminder of a powerful lesson in judgment and value. Around her neck, partially visible beneath her uniform scarf, she now wore a simple pendant of her own, not bronze from a shipwreck, but a small silver compass her grandmother had given her when she first left home to become a flight attendant. For years it had sat in a jewelry box, deemed too ordinary for her carefully curated professional image. Now it served as her own daily reminder about true worth and the dangers of surface judgment. As she welcomed a young woman in a wheelchair to first class, taking extra care to ensure her comfort, Vanessa noticed Marcus giving her an approving nod from across the gate area. Since the Keanu incident, as they now called it between themselves, her colleagues had noted a subtle shift in her approach, a deeper attentiveness that went beyond perfect service to genuine connection. The airline had noticed too. Just last week, her supervisor had called her in to share multiple passenger commendations, praising her for making them feel seen as people, not just passengers. High praise in an industry where efficiency often took precedence over genuine human connection. As the last first-class passenger boarded and Vanessa prepared to close the cabin door, she touched the compass pendant briefly, a gesture of centering that had become habit. The weight of it against her skin reminded her of what Keanu had tried to show her, that the most valuable things we carry through life are rarely the most expensive or impressive to others. That lesson, delivered with such grace by a man she had misjudged based on a simple necklace and casual clothes, had transformed not just how she approached her work, but how she moved through the world. In her decade of flying, she had served countless celebrities, executives, and powerful individuals, but none had left her with a more valuable souvenir than the understanding that true worth lies in how we treat one another, especially in moments of misunderstanding. As the aircraft doors closed and Vanessa began her pre-flight announcements, she surveyed the first-class cabin with new eyes, seeing not just passengers to be served, but individuals with their own treasured stories and meaningful symbols, each valuable far beyond any surface assessment could ever reveal. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice warm with genuine welcome, "on behalf of Captain Rivera and our entire crew, welcome aboard Flight 1876 to Los Angeles. We're honored to have you with us today, each and every one of you." And she meant it, more deeply than ever before. 6 months after her encounter with Keanu Reeves, Vanessa found herself unexpectedly included in a focus group developing new service guidelines for Pacific Airlines premium cabins. The airline was rethinking its approach to luxury service, trying to find a balance between exclusivity and authentic human connection in an increasingly competitive market. When asked what distinguished truly exceptional service from merely efficient service, Vanessa shared a carefully anonymized version of her experience with Keanu and the lesson she had learned about looking beyond appearances and status. "The most meaningful luxury we can offer isn't in the champagne brand or the thread count of the blankets," she concluded. "It's in recognizing the humanity in each person who boards our aircraft, regardless of what they're wearing or carrying, or even their reason for traveling in first class." Her perspective resonated deeply with the group, ultimately influencing Pacific Airlines' new service philosophy: beyond appearances, authentic connection in premium travel. The training program that followed emphasized looking past surface judgments to create genuine connections with passengers, a subtle but significant shift from the status-conscious approach that had previously defined first-class service across the industry. For Vanessa, the most meaningful confirmation that she had truly internalized the lesson came not from professional recognition, but from a moment nearly a year after her encounter with Keanu. On a flight from Chicago, an elderly man in a worn suit boarded first class with a plastic shopping bag as his only carry-on item. As he settled into his seat, Vanessa noticed several other passengers exchange glances, clearly questioning his presence in the premium cabin. Without hesitation, she welcomed him with the same warm attention she would give any passenger, engaging him in conversation as she offered the pre-flight beverage service. The man, it turned out, was a retired physics professor who had been upgraded as recognition for giving up his seat on an overbooked flight the previous day. The plastic bag contained books he had purchased at a scientific conference. As they talked, Vanessa noticed the executive seated across the aisle, listening with increasing interest. By the time the meal service began, the executive had joined their conversation, fascinated by the professor's insights on recent developments in quantum theory. What might once have been an uncomfortable class juxtaposition had transformed, through Vanessa's approach, into one of those rare and wonderful connections between strangers that sometimes happen in the liminal space of air travel. After the flight, as passengers disembarked, the professor thanked Vanessa for making him feel welcome in an environment where he had anticipated feeling out of place. "Not everyone sees past the packaging," he said with a knowing smile, gesturing to his humble attire. "A wise person once told me that the most valuable things rarely have anything to do with their monetary worth," Vanessa replied, touching her grandmother's compass pendant briefly. "Thank you for reminding me how true that is." As she completed her final cabin check that day, Vanessa reflected on how a single interaction, a misjudgment followed by a lesson graciously given, had created ripples that continued to expand, touching her life, her career, and now the experiences of other passengers in ways she could never have anticipated. The note from Keanu remained in her wallet, its edges softened from being occasionally unfolded and read in moments when she needed reminding of its wisdom. But the real souvenir of that encounter wasn't the physical note or even the memory of meeting a famous actor. It was the fundamental shift in perspective that had allowed her to move beyond appearances and connect more authentically with everyone she encountered, in first class, in economy, and in life beyond the aircraft cabin. In a profession where luxury was typically defined by exclusivity and material refinement, Vanessa had discovered a deeper truth about what truly constitutes first-class treatment, seeing the inherent value in each person, recognizing that the most precious things we carry often have stories visible only to those who take the time to look beyond the surface. And that, she had learned from an unassuming man with a meaningful bronze pendant, was the most valuable lesson of all.